The clinking of crystal glasses, the soft piano hum, and the hush of whispered conversations filled the restaurant like a practiced symphony. Rachel had come for peace, a quiet dinner after a long day curating her gallery's spring opening. Instead, she found Damian. He was seated beneath the low amber light of the chandelier, laughing. That laugh, the one that used to fill their hallway during better years, now echoing through her chest like static. Across the room, Ava sat beside him. Barely 25, with skin like glass and lips too red for the hour. Her laugh was higher-pitched, practiced. She leaned into Damian like she belonged there. Like she'd always belonged there. Rachel froze mid-step. The maitre d' paused, confused, menu still in hand. Damian hadn't seen her yet. Or maybe he had. Because just as Rachel turned, his head shifted. His smile widened. That wasn't an accident. She turned to the maitre d' and murmured, "Actually, something's come up. I won't be staying." Her voice barely carried. As she walked past their table, Ava's laughter cut through the air like silverware on porcelain. Damian glanced up. Their eyes met. Rachel didn't flinch. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and like, spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. But her hand clenched the small leather strap of her purse so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her pace never broke. Only her breath did, halfway out the door. Outside, the night air hit cold. She paused under the awning, the street lamp casting her shadow across the wet pavement. She pulled her phone from her coat. The screen lit up, no messages. Not that she expected any. Not from him. She wasn't sure why her hands were trembling. It wasn't love. That had bled dry long before Ava came along. It was something else. A sting that lingers when someone rewrites the end of your story without asking. 1 year. That's how long it had been since the divorce was finalized. Damian didn't waste time. 2 weeks later, photos of him and Ava vacationing in Santorini surfaced online. Rachel had tried not to care. She buried herself in work, curated exhibitions, and perfected the art of looking unbothered. But tonight undid all of that in 5 seconds. A couple walked past, laughing. Rachel realized she'd been standing still for too long. She tucked her phone back into her pocket and walked down the street. Heels clicking sharp against the sidewalk. Half a block later, her pace slowed. A nearby bistro buzzed with chatter. She glanced inside, not looking for anyone, just trying to feel something other than humiliation. Damian had chosen that restaurant on purpose. The same one where he once toasted her birthday and whispered promises over oysters. Now he brought Ava there, grinning as if that entire past was just scaffolding for his new life. Rachel exhaled slowly. She wasn't going to cry. Instead, she walked 2 more blocks and stepped into the quiet of her apartment building. As the elevator doors closed, she caught her reflection in the brushed metal, shoulders tight, eyes tired, mascara holding on. Back inside, she peeled off her coat, kicked off her shoes, and let the silence of the apartment wrap around her. She poured herself a glass of water, stood at the kitchen island, and whispered, "You win, Damian." Her phone buzzed suddenly. A new text. Unknown number. "You left early. Smart move. Call me when you're ready to stop pretending." She stared at the message. No name, but she knew who it was. Rachel didn't respond. Instead, she scrolled to her most recent contact, the man she met 3 nights ago at the gallery, the one with the calm voice and unreadable eyes. "Are you still in town?" she typed, and pressed send. Rachel stood outside the gallery, arms folded against the early evening chill, the last guests trailing out behind her. The closing show had gone well, sold pieces, polite compliments, curated smiles, but her mind was elsewhere, mostly on the text from last night. She still hadn't replied. The last pour of champagne remained untouched on the reception table, tiny bubbles dying quietly in the glass. "You curate memory better than anyone I've ever seen," a voice said. She turned. He wasn't someone she recognized. No name tag, no telltale art world badge of belonging. He wore a navy wool coat over a charcoal turtleneck, tall, calm, elegant in that kind of invisible way that doesn't ask for space but somehow owns it. Clean-shaven, a streak of silver at his temple. Late 30s, maybe 40s. Rachel blinked. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" "No," he said simply. "But I've been watching." Her shoulders stiffened slightly. He noticed. "I mean the art," he added quickly, with a slight smile. "This exhibit. The choices. You tell stories without needing permission." Rachel looked at him, unsure whether to smile or back away. Instead, she asked, "And what do you do?" Exactly. He paused. I read stories. Listen to them. Sometimes intervene when they're written badly. Like an editor? Something like that. Before she could ask more, her assistant called out from the front door. Some paperwork needed signing. Rachel nodded apologetically and turned. When she looked back moments later, the man was gone. That night, she thought of him again. Not the way she thought of Damian, sharp and full of memory, but quietly. Curiously, she even checked the guest list, but no one by that description was registered. The next day, he returned. She was arranging lighting in the gallery's main hall, sleeves rolled up, ladder half open. He stood in the doorway like he'd never left. I owe you a name, he said. Elias. Just that. No last name. No business card. I owe you one too, she replied, stepping down from the ladder. Rachel, I know. You always this mysterious. Only when it matters. That conversation lasted 9 minutes. They didn't talk about their lives. No family, no jobs, no details. Just thoughts on a painting she was rehanging, something abstract and violent and bright. He called it Resistance and Stillness. She laughed. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Yet you're smiling. And she was. Later that afternoon, Rachel found herself scrolling through Damian's latest post. A video of Ava spinning in their new kitchen. He captioned it, "Upgrade complete. Forever starts now." The comments were brutal, friends clapping backhandedly, strangers admiring Ava's looks. One even wrote, "Bet your ex is kicking herself now." Rachel closed the app. She sat at her desk, looked at a framed photo of herself from years ago, wearing the same soft pink dress Ava had on in the video. She remembered the day Damian had insisted she wear it. "You need color. You look too serious all the time." Her jaw tightened. Then a message pinged. "Elias, that painting, Resistance and Stillness, I wasn't joking. Let me know if you want to talk more about it. Or not talk at all." She stared at the message for a full minute. And replied, "Tomorrow, 5 p.m., bring coffee." The next afternoon, as Rachel rearranged her gallery for the new season, she looked up to find Elias already there, coffee in hand, waiting silently like a sentence she hadn't yet read. But somewhere in the city, Damian was swiping through old photos, the one with Rachel in that dress, laughing beside him at a wedding. His smile faded. Just for a second. He didn't know yet, but his story was no longer the only one being told. The rain started around 7, soft at first, then steadier, tapping against the tall gallery windows like impatient fingers. Elias arrived without an umbrella, his coat dusted with droplets. He handed her coffee again, though this time, it wasn't coffee. 2 small bottles of Merlot peeked out of the brown bag. "I thought you might need something warmer tonight," he said. Rachel hesitated, then nodded, letting him in. They sat in the unfinished east wing, bare walls, crates, a single standing lamp between them. The wine glasses came from her desk drawer, dusty but clean. It took 3 sips before she started talking. "It wasn't always bad," she began, eyes focused on the crimson swirl in her glass. "That's what people get wrong. It started soft. He didn't hit me. He never screamed. Just chipped at me, like I was something to be reshaped." Elias didn't speak. He didn't need to. Rachel went on. He'd say things like, "I'm only pushing you because I believe in you," or, "You make me feel small when you're like this." And when I'd cry, he'd sigh and say, "There you go again." Turning everything into a drama. She smiled tightly. Eventually, I stopped crying. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. "I lost a baby," she said softly. 7 weeks in. I was running the gallery's spring show. Stressful week, too many things on my plate. One night, I started bleeding. He drove me to the hospital, sat with me, didn't speak. Elias leaned forward slightly, his hands still on his knees. When the doctor confirmed the miscarriage, he asked if I'd been overexerting. Damian cut in and said, "She never knows how to stop." That was all, like it had nothing to do with us. Rachel took a breath. He never mentioned the baby again, never said the word, just moved on. A week later, he booked us a trip to Rome and said, "It'll clear your head." Like I'd misfiled a document, not lost something that was supposed to be ours. The wine in her glass rippled slightly in her hand. Her fingers were trembling, just enough for Elias to notice. "He used silence as punishment," she continued. "When I disagreed, he'd go days without speaking, slept on the edge of the bed. One night, I tried to apologize for something I didn't even believe was my fault. He kissed my forehead and said, "Good girl." Like I was a pet that finally behaved. A long pause stretched between them. Then Elias spoke, for the first time in 20 minutes. "How long were you married?" Rachel laughed, dry small. 5 years. But it felt longer. Like time changed inside that house. "And when did you know it was over?" She looked at him. Her eyes didn't flinch this time. "When he told me Ava wasn't the reason. Just the reminder." Elias nodded once, slowly. "And yet you still think about him." "I don't want him back," she said. "I just want to understand why I let it happen for so long." He set down his glass. "Because you were taught love was earned." And he knew that. That silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was necessary. Rachel stared at the shadows dancing on the walls. "What do you do, Elias?" "Really?" He gave her the faintest smile. "I listen to stories. And make sure the right ones end the way they should." Outside, the rain softened. And deep in another part of the city, Damian stared at his phone. Rachel hadn't responded to his last message. So he sent another. "I know you're still watching me. You always did." The envelope was ivory, thick, and expensive. Rachel found it tucked beneath the door of her gallery office one morning. No stamp, no address, just her name in delicate gold script. Inside, a folded card. "Damian and Ava invite you to celebrate their engagement. This Friday. Hotel in Daris. 8 p.m. At the bottom, a handwritten note in delicate ink. "I've heard so much about you. Would love to finally meet." Ava. Rachel stared at it for a full minute, unsure if she was more insulted or amused. The paper smelled faintly of roses. Artificial and overbearing. She tossed it onto her desk and went back to inventorying sculpture tags. But her mind stayed on that note. The tone, the confidence. Ava wasn't trying to extend kindness. She was marking territory. That night, Rachel poured wine and told Elias about the invitation. He listened silently as always, but this time, when she finished, he leaned back and said, "Go." Rachel blinked. "Excuse me." "Go," he repeated, "and don't go small." She laughed, almost spitting her drink. "Why would I walk into that? It's a circus." "Then show them you don't perform for free." She studied his face. Calm. Certain. The same man who listened without interruption when she unraveled, now telling her to rise. On Friday evening, Rachel stood in front of her mirror wearing a black floor-length dress that fit like it had been waiting for this moment. Simple, clean, elegant. Her hair swept up. A single diamond in her ear, one she bought herself. At exactly 7:52, Elias knocked. Charcoal suit. Crisp white shirt. No tie. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. The hotel ballroom was all chandeliers and shallow laughter. Waiters floated by with trays of champagne, and a violinist played something too cheerful for the occasion. They entered together. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Rachel saw Ava first, tall, glittering in a pale gold gown, her arm looped through Damian's. She was smiling until she noticed where everyone was looking. Then she turned. Damian followed her gaze. His smirk appeared instantly. He tilted his head, mocking, charming, smug, until he saw who was beside Rachel. His face didn't change at once. Just a flicker, like recognition catching the wrong thread in his memory. Elias, for his part, remained composed. He gave Damian a subtle nod, then turned to accept 2 glasses of champagne. Rachel took one. Damian moved forward, Ava hesitating beside him. "Well," he said, voice smooth. "This is a surprise." Rachel tilted her head. "I got your invitation." "Not from me," Ava interjected, voice bright, almost too bright. "I sent it. I thought it was time." "Time for what?" Elias asked. Ava blinked. "Just to clear the air. New beginnings." Damian's gaze flicked back to Elias. "And you are?" "Elias," he said simply. "A friend." Rachel watched Damian. That flicker again. Deeper now. He recognized the name, or thought he did, but couldn't place it. Elias smiled faintly. "And you must be the man who traded a woman of substance for a girl who writes notes and glitter pins." Ava's jaw tightened. Damian's smile vanished. Rachel touched Elias's arm. "Let's get a drink." They moved past the couple, leaving silence in their wake. The rest of the evening passed in fragments, guests stealing glances, whispers behind glasses, Ava nervously touching her necklace. Damian barely mingled. By midnight, Rachel and Elias had already left. As the ballroom doors closed behind them, Ava turned to Damian. "Do you know him?" He didn't answer, but his fingers dug into the side of his glass until the stem cracked. The hotel suite smelled faintly of perfume, burnt candle wax, and something bitter, Damian's mood. He yanked off his tie, slung it across the dresser, and sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on knees, staring at the floor like it had answers. Ava emerged from the bathroom, removing her earrings one by one. "You didn't say goodnight to half the room," she said softly. "Wasn't in the mood," Damian muttered. She watched him through the mirror. "You were fine all night. Until they showed up." He didn't look at her. "Who invited him?" "I told you. I invited Rachel." "Not him." Damian finally looked up. "You don't even know who he is, do you?" Ava turned. "He said his name was Elias. That's all." Damian stood, walked over, too close. "That's not all. The way he looked at me, like he already knew me. And Rachel, the way she walked in with him like she was, like what? Like she'd already won." Ava crossed her arms. "You're being paranoid." "No," he snapped. "I'm being careful." She took a breath. "You're jealous. Of her. Of him." Damian scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous." But even he didn't believe it. Downstairs, the remnants of their engagement party were being swept away, champagne flutes clinking in plastic tubs, laughter long gone. But Damian's thoughts refused to settle. Later that night, after Ava fell asleep, he slipped out of bed, grabbed his phone, and walked into the dark hallway. He opened his browser. Search, Elias plus Rachel plus gallery nothing. He scrolled. Nothing. Change the query. Search, Elias plus Rowan plus New York plus investment there. A headline. Private investor Elias Rowan acquires majority stake in East Point Legal. Damian froze. East Point. That firm name had surfaced once before, when he was being investigated for questionable restructuring deals during a failed partnership. They never filed charges, but the inquiries had cost him contracts and reputation. He clicked the link. Elias Rowan, 43, private investor, real estate, tech, legal advisory, known for operating quietly behind high-profile lawsuits. Almost no photos, just one grainy headshot from a charity event. Damian's fingers curled. Search, Elias Rowan plus net worth an article, Elias Rowan. The billionaire you've never heard of. He slammed the phone down onto the side table. In the silence, Ava stirred. "What are you doing?" she murmured sleepily. "Just thinking," he muttered. She sat up. "Damian, do you know him?" His jaw clenched. "I might," he said. "Or I might have crossed someone who knows him." "Why would Rachel be with someone like that?" "Because she's not stupid," he snapped. "She knew I'd see them together. That's what this was. A move." Ava blinked. "You think she planned this?" Damian turned to her, his voice low, tense. "Everything about Rachel is calculated. You think she just happened to fall into the arms of one of the most powerful men in the city? Please. You really think she's capable of that? She was always capable of more than she let on." Ava stared at him, confused, and for the first time, wary. "She's your ex-wife, Damian," she said carefully. "Not your enemy." His eyes flicked to her. "If you think those are different things, you haven't lived long enough." Ava said nothing. In the morning, when she woke, he was gone. His side of the bed was cold. Downstairs, Damian was back on his laptop. Clicking. Reading. Digging. Every time he refreshed the page, Elias Rowan's name stared back at him. And somewhere across the city, Rachel stood barefoot in her kitchen, sipping coffee while Elias read silently on her couch. No questions asked. No expectations offered. Just presence. The very thing Damian never knew how to give. It started with a box Rachel had forgotten in the back of her storage closet. The kind of box filled with divorce detritus, unlabeled cables, expired credit cards, tax documents no one reads. She nearly tossed it. But as she sifted through the mess, a slim silver flash drive tumbled out, still marked with Damian's old initials, DAW. She stared at it, heart steady but fingers hesitant. She didn't want to care, didn't want to know. And yet she plugged it in. The screen blinked. A single folder appeared. Archive, personal. No password. Inside were old spreadsheets, basic at first, utility bills, flight bookings. But as she dug deeper, the dates shifted to the final months of their marriage. Then came the PDFs. Indy_June.pdf, her pulse ticked. She clicked it open. It was dated 3 months before Damian confessed the affair. Language vague, but unmistakable. Confidentiality clauses, non-disclosure regarding personal and financial involvement. She scrolled through more documents, offshore account logs, large transfers to a consulting agency she'd never heard of, invoices from hotels under Ava's maiden name. Everything lined up too cleanly. A lie hidden in plain numbers. And then, buried in a folder labeled Old Drafts, she found the email. To Ava. Subject, stay quiet until I lock this down. The body read, I'll get the assets sorted, and once she signs the final papers, we can stop pretending. Play your role. I'll handle the rest. Rachel sat back, her throat dry. It wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestration. She picked up her phone and called Elias. No small talk. Are you busy? Only if it's not important, he said. I found something. 20 minutes later, they sat in her living room, the flash drive connected to her laptop, the damning files open on the screen. Elias didn't react. His eyes only flicked slightly as he scrolled. He used you to protect what he knew was already his, Elias said, finally. Rachel folded her arms. Can any of this be used? It depends, he said. But if the timing overlaps with your asset division, this could be fraud, financial misconduct, and depending on Ava's role, possibly collusion. She raised an eyebrow. You talk like a lawyer. He looked at her. I'm not, he said, then paused. But I own the firm, that is. She blinked. What firm? East Point Legal. The name hit like a dropped glass. She'd heard Damian curse it once. After a collapsed deal years ago. Something about sharks in suits who don't even show their teeth. Rachel's breath caught. You knew. I suspected, Elias replied. But I needed proof. And you just found it. She stood, uneasy. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I didn't want you to mistake protection for control. That's what he did. She looked at him, really looked at him. And for once, didn't feel outmatched. Just seen. He continued. There's enough here to reopen the terms of your divorce. Possibly more. She turned back to the screen. The numbers. The lies. I don't want revenge, she whispered. Elias nodded. Then call it correction. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere across the city, Damian sat in his office, combing through articles, scouring Elias's history. But for all his research, he never expected Rachel would find what he'd hidden in plain sight. And he certainly didn't expect the woman he once dismissed to be the one holding the first match. Ava stood just outside Damian's home office, barefoot on the cool marble tile, heart pounding faster with each muffled word. I told you to keep it buried, Damian hissed into the phone. If anything resurfaces, you're the one who signed it, not me. A pause. No, listen to me. That woman knows exactly what she's doing. She's not just showing up for attention. She's got help. And if she links Elias to any of this, I swear, you'll be next. Another pause. Then, more quietly, because Ava was never supposed to matter. She was a decoy, a transition. So handle it. Click. Ava didn't move. Her fingertips trembled against the wall. The words echoed in her chest. She barely breathed until she heard Damian's footsteps walking toward the kitchen. She slipped back into the hallway, into their shared bedroom, and shut the door without a sound. She was never supposed to matter. The words played on repeat in her head. Cold. Clinical. Like she was a puzzle piece in someone else's plan. She waited until she heard the front door open, his usual late-night walk to clear his head. As if clarity had ever been something he cared about. Then she crossed to his desk. Damian kept everything digital. But he was arrogant, and arrogance made men sloppy. The laptop was open. Password protected, but she'd watched him type it in enough times. Rachel 2020. Her throat clenched. She typed it in. The screen opened. She searched folders, finance, property, legal. But then she found it, a folder tucked behind a series of decoy names. Archive private. She clicked it. Her breath stopped. Photos. Of Rachel. Some were older, wedding anniversaries, trips, but others were recent. Post-divorce. Rachel walking down the street. Leaving her gallery. At a coffee shop alone, reading. Always from a distance. Always watched. Ava's fingers hovered above the mouse. Another subfolder. Leverage. She clicked. Emails. Between Damian and an unnamed contact. Discussion of asset transfers, NDA enforcement, media control. Ava's name was mentioned once, in relation to a timeline. Use Ava to finalize separation. Easier with a visible exit strategy. Her stomach turned. Everything had been calculated. She wasn't love. She was optics. The laptop snapped shut suddenly, and Ava gasped. Damian stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. "What are you doing?" She stepped back. "What is all that?" His voice was calm, too calm. "Why are you going through my things?" "That's not an answer." "Because you don't need one." She held his stare. "You used me. I gave you a life," he snapped. "More than you ever had." "I was your cover story," she said quietly. "Your bait." He moved forward. "Don't pretend you didn't enjoy it. The house. The ring. The parties. You liked being envied. That's not love, Damian." "No," he said flatly. "It's power. And I don't lose power." She flinched. And he slapped her. It wasn't hard, but it was enough to make her stagger. For a moment, the room stood still. Damian breathed heavily. "Don't ever go through my things again." Ava touched her cheek, her voice shaking. "You're not scared of Rachel. You're scared of who she became without you." Damian didn't reply. She walked out the door without grabbing her coat. Down the hall, her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. We need to talk." "I know what he did." E.R. She paused and walked faster. The conference room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the projector. Rachel sat at the head of the long oak table, flanked by two women in navy suits from Elias's firm. Elias himself stood off to the side, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the screen. He hadn't said much since the file came in. Neither had Rachel. Until now. The screen flickered, and a grainy timestamp appeared, May 17th, 7:13 p.m. Footage rolled from Damian's private office building, a side entrance, the camera angled just enough to catch faces. In walked Ava. Not the poised, public Ava of designer gowns and cocktail smiles. This Ava looked nervous. Hair tucked under a hood, glancing over her shoulder, clutching her phone like it might disappear. Rachel leaned in. "That's 3 months before the affair was made public," the younger attorney noted. "For months before he served me papers," Rachel added quietly. They watched Ava enter the building. 10 minutes later, Damian followed through a different door. The timestamp jumped. They never exited together. "Fast forward to the second file," said the senior attorney, clicking to another video. "This one's from the lobby 2 weeks before the divorce filing." The footage played. Rachel watched herself on screen, walking briskly through the lobby, shoulders tight, phone to her ear. Then, suddenly, her heel caught the corner of the rug. She fell hard, head first. Rachel winced instinctively. She hadn't remembered it like that. In the footage, a man, Damian, rushed in seconds later. But something about it was off. His reaction was delayed. Too slow. He didn't run. He walked. He didn't call for help. Just looked down. Then glanced straight at the camera. The footage jumped again. Glitched. Then faded to black. Elias stepped forward. "That glitch? It's not a malfunction. We pulled metadata." The footage was manually scrubbed. "Scrubbed?" Rachel asked. "Deleted, then replaced with altered timestamps to conceal gaps." The room went still. Rachel felt her stomach sink. "He knew the footage showed him watching me fall," she murmured. "Not helping. Just watching." Elias nodded. "It supports your claim of coercive control. And if proven intentional, the tampering constitutes obstruction." The younger attorney added, "And the Ava entry file strengthens your asset concealment case. If she was involved before the divorce was even mentioned, your agreement is legally compromised." Rachel stared at the frozen screen, her body on the ground, Damian above her. And that look, cold, calculating, already planning the narrative. "This wasn't just gaslighting," she whispered. "He made me believe I tripped. He let me think it was clumsiness. But he was already erasing evidence." The door creaked. A knock. A staff member entered and handed a sealed envelope to Elias. He opened it, scanned the letter, and looked at Rachel. "That was from the state records office," he said. "We subpoenaed Damian's insurance logs from that building." Rachel waited. Elias's voice was calm. "There was a second insurance claim filed the day after your fall, for damage to a hallway camera. He claimed it short-circuited due to moisture. But tech reports show the damage was internal. Manual tampering." The pieces clicked. "He filed the insurance to cover the evidence," Rachel said. "To erase the truth," Elias confirmed. Rachel took a slow breath. She wasn't falling anymore. She was remembering. This time, the ground beneath her held firm. Elias turned off the projector. "We move forward. Carefully, but we move." And across the city, Damian poured himself a drink. His phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You're not just being watched. You're being recorded." The invitation arrived the next morning, printed on textured black cardstock, sealed in silver wax. Rachel turned it over in her hands. Gala benefiting the Legal Aid Fund, hosted by Elias Rowan. She stared at the name, no longer a mystery, but still something she hadn't fully grasped. He'd been standing beside her for weeks, listening, observing, guiding. Now he was stepping forward. Later that afternoon, she met Elias at his office, though office wasn't the right word. The entire top floor of a midtown tower was his. Bookshelves lined with legal journals, abstract art on every wall, floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like something conquered. She stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed. "So," she said, "this is who you are." Elias looked up from his desk, the faintest smile tugging at his mouth. "I told you I listened to stories," he said. "I just didn't mention how many chapters I've paid for." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "And the firm. I co-founded it. Years ago. Quietly. I'm not on the board. Just a voice when needed. And you chose mine to amplify?" He stood, walked over. "No. I chose truth. Yours just happened to threaten someone whose lies I couldn't ignore." Rachel didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. That night, the gala glimmered with quiet power. Old money and new visionaries mingling over champagne and subtle vendettas. The venue was an old opera house, candlelit and echoing with soft music. Rachel arrived in navy silk, her hair pinned back, a simple silver pendant resting at her collarbone. The same woman Damian had once overlooked now turned heads with every step. Elias met her at the door. "You look like someone who's never needed permission," he said. She smiled. "That's the idea." Midway through the evening, Elias took the stage. His speech was short, articulate, about justice beyond courtrooms and dignity beyond verdicts. He didn't mention Rachel. He didn't need to. But the real shift came later. A hush spread across the crowd. Ava appeared. Alone. She wore no makeup, no smile, just a calmness that seemed foreign to the girl who once giggled on Damian's arm. She walked directly to the center of the room, removed the diamond ring from her finger, and set it on the donation table with the legal aid brochures. "I'm not here to speak," she said, voice clear. "I'm just here to stop being silent." A few gasps. Some whispers. Phones discreetly lifted. Rachel watched from the edge of the crowd, her expression unreadable. Elias stepped beside her. "We didn't ask her to come." "I know," Rachel said, "but she did." Later, on the balcony overlooking the city, Rachel stood with a glass of water, wind lifting strands of her hair. Elias joined her in silence. She didn't thank him. He didn't need her to. Instead, he said, "Justice doesn't always need a gavel." She looked out at the skyline. Sometimes it just needs to be seen. Below them, Damian's world was cracking. Ava's public gesture had gone viral within minutes. Media outlets were already digging through past partnerships, ethics filings, sealed settlements. He watched the footage on his phone, veins throbbing in his temples. In the background, the door to his study creaked. He turned, startled, but no one was there. Just silence, and the sound of everything slipping from his grip. It happened on a Tuesday. Damian exited his high-rise building at precisely 9:06 a.m. Sunglasses on, Bluetooth in one ear, barking instructions to someone on the other end. His assistant trailed behind, barely able to keep up. Across the street, two black government sedans idled in the loading zone. As he reached the curb, a man in a gray suit stepped forward. "Mr. Damian Alexander Ward?" Damian turned, annoyed. "Who's asking?" "Detective Hart, Financial Crimes Unit. You're under arrest." The words didn't land. Not immediately. Then came the cuffs. Camera shutters erupted from behind parked vans. A swarm of reporters emerged like hornets, microphones extended, questions flying like darts. "Mr. Ward, are the charges true? Is it correct you manipulated evidence in your divorce? Did you bribe your fiancée to lie under oath?" Damian's face twisted, half confusion, half rage. "This is a mistake. I want my lawyer." "Already notified," the detective replied flatly, guiding him into the car. Across the city, Rachel watched the footage on mute. The screen showed everything. The flashing cameras, the glint of handcuffs, Damian's trademark smirk cracking into something smaller, uglier. His control, gone. She didn't smile. She simply closed her laptop and turned her phone off. That same morning, Ava walked into the downtown precinct with her lawyer and filed a formal petition for a protective order. Her hands were steady, her voice calm. She submitted digital evidence, sworn statements, and personal journals. She didn't cry. Later, she stood outside the courthouse, staring at the building she once thought only applied to other people. And for the first time in years, she exhaled without fear. The media spun fast. Articles flooded in by afternoon. Tech consultant arrested in multi-firm fraud scheme. Former wife and fiancé both involved in legal takedown. Quiet billionaire Elias Rowan linked to major legal restructure. Rachel's phone rang over a dozen times. Reporters, old friends, curious strangers. She answered none of them. Instead, she went to the garden behind her gallery, curled into a metal chair with her knees tucked to her chest, and stared at the roses Elias had helped plant the week before. Elias arrived just after sunset. He brought no flowers, no fanfare, just himself, and a flask of Earl Grey tea. They booked him without bail, he said softly, sitting beside her. She nodded. They're offering Ava immunity in exchange for testimony. She deserves that, Rachel replied. Elias handed her the tea. Their fingers brushed. Silence settled between them like dusk. I don't feel anything, Rachel whispered. You will, he said. But not tonight. Across town, Damian sat in a holding cell, his designer suit rumpled, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. The walls were gray. The silence unbearable. A guard opened the cell. Visiting room. Damian stood, disoriented. Who? The guard shrugged. Didn't say. When he entered, the room was empty, except for a letter on the table. He picked it up, typed, and signed, untraceable. Your empire was paper, built on silence, secrecy, and shadows. All it took was one woman choosing to be seen. He slammed his fist against the wall. Outside, the guards barely blinked. As they led him back to the cell, Damian turned, face red, eyes wild. You think you've won? He shouted, voice echoing. But no one answered. And no one stopped walking. The cottage sat at the edge of a tree line, just outside the city limits. Modest. White shutters, ivy curling along the porch, and a narrow gravel path that crunched underfoot. It wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. But it was hers. Rachel leaned against the wooden railing, watching the morning fog lift from the fields. A ceramic mug warmed her palms, lavender tea, no sugar, just quiet. There were no reporters anymore. The media storm had shifted to another scandal. Ava had disappeared from the spotlight, her name replaced by others. Damian remained in custody, awaiting trial. His lawyers released cold statements. He'd filed a motion to suppress the footage, denied. Rachel hadn't attended a single hearing. She didn't need to. Her life was no longer a courtroom. A knock came, 2 soft taps. She opened the door to find Elias standing there, holding 2 paper cups and a brown bag. No more champagne galas, she teased gently. He smiled. Only breakfast picnics. She stepped aside, and he entered, setting everything on the small table near the kitchen window. They sat facing each other, the light streaming in, gentle and gold. What's in the bag? She asked. Something scandalous. He unwrapped it, 2 plain butter croissants. She laughed. I've missed scandal. They ate in companionable silence. No tension, no agenda, just stillness. Rachel looked out at the garden, where a few daisies had bloomed early. I never thought I'd end up here, she said. Away from everything. Elias followed her gaze. You didn't end up here. You chose it. She nodded slowly. There was a time I couldn't choose anything. Even breakfast. Even silence. Everything I did was edited in my head first. How Damian would spin it. How he'd frame my intentions. And now? Elias asked. Now I wake up and no one asks me where I'm going. No one comments if I buy 2 bottles of wine instead of 1. No one looks at me like I'm a project. Elias watched her. She continued. I thought healing would feel louder. Like a celebration. But it's this. The absence of noise. That's the real celebration, he said. Not the party. The peace. She smiled. Not out of politeness. Out of knowing. He reached for his coffee. So what happens now? Rachel took a breath. Now, I learned to be with myself. Fully. I don't want to be someone's wife right now. Not anyone's other half. Just whole. Elias didn't flinch. Good. You already built your empire. He leaned back. I steady. I just made sure no one tore it down again. She looked at him, the man who had arrived quietly and stayed even quieter. The man who asked nothing and gave everything that mattered. Space, stillness, safety. Why me? She asked. Elias sipped his coffee. Because I saw a woman still standing in the ashes of something meant to destroy her. And I thought, there's someone worth watching rise. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The clock ticked. A bird landed on the windowsill, then flew off again. Elias stood. I'll let you get back to your day. Rachel walked him to the door. As he stepped outside, she paused. I don't know what this is between us, she said. He turned. It doesn't have to be anything, he replied. It just has to be honest. And with that, he left. Rachel stood on the porch a while longer. No ringing phone. No urgent calendar. No guilt for needing rest. Just wind. Trees. The rhythm of something healing. Inside, she returned to her canvas, a blank one. She dipped her brush in paint, touched it gently to the surface, and began again. This time, the story was hers alone. And she wasn't writing it to survive. She was writing it to breathe.